think we're live. We're gonna do that awkward thing that you do every time, like you start a live, where you're like, "Can anybody hear me?" Hey guys, I'm Mike. This is Taniesa Velez, and we are going to talk about her practice. It is Lawyer Forward Live on a Friday. So we're going to go through her practice, talk about her experience a little bit. If you can't stick around for it, just know that we're going to move this over to YouTube and also to the podcast, which there's a whole story to what's been going on with the podcast that none of you care about. But yeah, so we'll get this up into other places as well if you are not able to stick around right now. And also, if you are here and you want to, you can ask questions. And I can answer the questions live. So all you have to do is ask questions in the comments below this post, and I will be able to ask them to Taniesa. Anyway, hi, Taniesa. How are you?
Hi, I'm good. I'm good. How are you?
I'm feeling jazzed up. I was telling you, I just had to rush and eat lunch with my wife because she wanted to have some lunch, and the sandwich took forever. And by the time it got out, we had this like big old sandwich, and we were like, we literally have 3 minutes to eat this. And so the reason I'm wearing a hoodie is because some of the sandwich is on my shirt, as you do when you're in a big stupid
I love
hurry. Yeah, so that jazzed up, we're in a hurry thing. We um, let's have a chat. We're gonna riff a little bit. You and I had a conversation in preparation, and so just to give people context, I want to tell them a little bit about your practice. So tell me where you are, what you're working, like what your practice is built on. Talk to me about your practice background.
Okay. So, yeah, I opened my practice May of 2020. Have been open for super long time, but started initially wanting to only do personal injury in the rural area that I was at. And as I kind of continued on, a lot of family calls kept calling, and now my practice is mostly comprised of family matters, lots of divorce and custody. So that's kind of what I'm doing right now is just a little bit of the straggling PI cases and a lot of family matters. So
Yeah, when you were in the rural area, and for anyone who's read my product placed book here, you see the product placement. You'll know that I practice in Rockport, Texas, which is sort of the middle of nowhere. I mean, it's on the coast, so technically it's not the middle of nowhere, but very rural. And I wrote in the book that you sort of feel more like a social worker in an under resourced community than you feel like a lawyer. Like a lot of times you're just guiding people through. I remember there was a guy who was like filling out a DMV form in front of me and was like, "How do I fill this out?" I'm like, I can't remember DMV class from law school. That was so long ago. There's no DMV class. So you were in that circumstance where you're sort of taking everything to now you're in a city, a mid to small market, but still a city, and it sounds like you're able to say, I practice this. Is that right?
yeah, I mean, as I continue to really hone in my practice area, hone in my message, and get everything bundled administratively and procedurally, I'm really focusing more on what specific niche I want to be in, and I think that I've gravitated, most towards divorce and custody,
Yeah.
contested divorce I still have, but I'm kind of trying to wean out of these little tiny practice areas within family and really focus on, the big matter of divorce and the big matter of, parental custody battles.
I remember a buddy of mine, Dirk Jordan, when I was in law school. We were talking about me opening my own practice, and he said, I'll give you one piece of advice. Don't do any practice area where people are going to be crying in your office. So, of course, I did family law and totally ignored him. And it just wore me the freak down. I like the idea of, I've said this many times, a practice area is not a niche, right? It's just a bundle of services. It's just you saying, like, these are the things that I offer as a service. But a niche either has to do with like a really narrow subject, so like super expert on Hague Convention cases, crossboard, like you got to get really narrow, or it's a group of people, which, can be identified in a lot of ways. And when you're rural, that group of people niche can be the town. Like you can put up a billboard and you're literally talking to the entire town. For you, do you feel like you're targeting more on this is the super nerdy thing that no one else can do. I want to only have 10 clients at a time and just knock it out of the park? Or do you feel like you're more inclined to, well, this is the kind of person that I solve and I take whatever problems they bring me, within certain limits? Do you think you're like expertise focused or audience focused?
More so audience focused because I am a virtual firm. So not every client that calls me, would work well with what I do, my model, what I want to communicate with. So I'm trying to really hone in on a specific audience. So, you're professional or someone who is tech savvy, someone who is not going to want me to blow their phone up with updates, like a
Right.
simple email, communicating. I think that works best in a virtual setting because
Hmm.
some clients, some audiences really want that traditional, come and sit on my comfy office chair and let me bring you a cup of coffee and let's talk about your matter. And some clients are just like, hey, this is my issue. Like, I'm hiring you to do it. I don't want to think about it. Just handle it. And I think those are more of like, my age around there, technological savvy, more professional sense. So that's kind of what I'm trying to focus on is the niche audience and not necessarily the practice area because,
Hmm.
family, there is a lot of like little specific things I can hone into. But at this point, I think it's best if I just stick with an audience and then go from there as I continue.
So where are most of your clients coming from now?
Um, Jefferson County.
Sorry, what like lead source? Like how are they finding you, I should say?
Just online.
Hmm.
Google, social media. I do have TikTok videos that I really was
Wait,
into
do
a
you do
lot.
the music thing where it like plays music in the background and you sit there and you just point at boxes and that? Do you do that
Exactly.
stuff?
I do. So more so again when I first moved to Louisville because I had so much more time. I didn't have as many matters opened and pending. So, but now as the days go by, I'm like, I
There's
don't even have
not there's not nearly as much time to point around while songs are playing. Yeah.
like invisible like boxes. There's not as much. I wish I could, but I don't have as much time as I'd like. But
It's
yeah,
created a hole in my life that I'm not able to point at, text boxes anymore. Yeah, it's interesting. We were talking to another lawyer last week that in some ways, like your marketing will, when you do a kind of marketing that only certain kind of people like, your clients will become that certain kind of people. And so you sort of make sure you're doing the kind of marketing that attracts that kind of people. So to your point that you just described, like my mom does not watch TikTok. Shit, I don't watch TikTok. I can only take so much of the pointing at boxes. I know people keep telling me like, "Oh my gosh, you'd just be great at TikTok with all the stupid dad jokes," and I'm like, "I know you think that sounds like a compliment, but it doesn't feel like one." But I'm assuming that by doing those kinds of marketing activities, that you're more likely to get the kind of people that you're looking for. But you mentioned Google. Like if you put up a Google My Business, it's literally like a phone book listing, right? If you have a Google My Business listing, it's like a phone book listing. Any schmo can call you. How do you take those Google My Business leads or Google search leads or wherever they're coming from when you say Google and turning them into your kind of people?
I mean, a lot of that is an actual consult, right? So, and in my case management software, I'm able to pin exactly where these calls are coming from. But, and fortunately, where I am now, if I'm talking to someone, within the first few minutes, I already know if this is a client that I want to take. I already know if they're tech savvy. I know if I don't want to take them or not. And
Right.
I have a list of referrals in the area, whether that's opposing counsel that I've come across with or friends, colleagues that I quickly, revert to and say, hey, call these people. These would be great for you to reach out to. Um,
So thinking about that intake process, talk me through how you're doing that now, and it's never what we want it to be, right? So how are you sort of targeting improvements on that intake? Are you, for example, if you very early are like, dude, in order to get to me, you got to go fill out this form on this collaborative platform or whatever, you're weeding people out automatically. Are you doing that kind of thing?
so I started out um, answering all my phones, being the first point of contact.
Yeah.
Um, and it just became overwhelming, especially with family matters because people want to tell you everything. They don't want to answer your questions. They want to tell you everything from 10 years ago, how they got to now. And then I was like, okay, we have to improve this. This is not working. I can't work on what I have, my paying clients. So it's been a lot of trial and error, answering services, booking links, in-person consultation links. So um, sometimes you go in with a plan and you go in with your 6 questions that you have, and it just doesn't work out. So it's been a lot of trial and error, but I think recently it's been beneficial to have all my clients. They have my answering service, they're routed to my booking link. I can follow up on the consult and the intake and call them back. And then if it's a client that I don't want to take, or that would be better suited for someone else with larger resources, I have my answering service call them back and give them referrals. So.
Okay. Yeah, you and I talked about, speaking of what the subject a bit that I hooked people into this conversation with, a bit about your moving, right? Like you got to practice here, you move there, considering a move elsewhere. And it's, without getting into the personal life stuff, which of course is crazy to say because like when you own your own practice, your personal life and your professional life are the same thing, right? They just interact with each other so much. But without digging into that stuff too much, you know, you, I moved after having built a practice, and every time you do it, you're like, oh my gosh, I've got these 5 cases. I've got these 10 cases. I can't leave this. I've got whatever referral network. I've got all these goods. Talk to me about that decision making process of how you think through, okay, here's what I'm leaving behind, and I'm okay with leaving that behind. Here's what I'm keeping with me of this stuff. Maybe I want to maintain a practice back in the old city and be licensed in 2 states or whatever. How do you think that through that process of what you're gaining and what you're losing?
Yeah, so when I was in the rural area, so originally I'm from California, but I never practiced in California. I was in law school, I clerked a bunch, not a big deal. When I moved here to the rural area, again, I just had started my firm in May of 2020. So the clients that I did have were mostly PI.
Yeah.
You don't really need a lot of contact as far as, with court and all that stuff with PI. It's really easy to up and move. So it wasn't really a thought process that I thought was holding me back. It was more like, well, personally, I'd be happier in a large city as a California girl. And then whatever comes, or whatever doesn't. So it wasn't really like a con or pro situation that I had because, you know, being a lawyer, you have to have your mental health correct, right? Because you're no help counseling or advocating for someone, especially in a family context, if you're just like, dang, it sucks here. Like it's all, bundled up into just stuff that you can't really.
Yeah, there was a lawyer who I didn't agree with on much, but he said to me one time, he was like, no client wants you, when you're fighting for their custody of their kids, no client wants you standing there worrying about your electric bill. Like, is my family back home? Is the electricity going to be turned off? So, yeah, like, you really do have to take care of yourself in order to do that job well. But I'm assuming now, because you're doing family law, I mean, if you were to move to Ireland,
Mhm.
like you've got cases, and there are cases with appearances, and like you would be dropping cases. It sounds like when you moved initially, that wasn't much of a concern because you're not that, you're in state or whatever. You're able to maintain that with the PI cases. But, now the decision's harder, right?
Right. Yeah, it definitely is. Luckily, I have a good friend slash mentor who I really kind of dumped all my cases from that area. I was like, hey, take these. You're great. I can't handle them up here. But yeah, I mean, that decision, even when you're going on vacation, as a solo practitioner, as a
Right.
true solo, and you have appearances, you either have to push everything out for weeks and let everyone know not to contact you, or you have to find an appearance counsel. And that's really hard.
Yeah.
It's really hard to get all those moving pieces as a young solo. So
So do you think, and maybe this is a bigger picture than you want to go, I, true solo to me, and I say this in the book, and I'll say this to you and to anybody else, being a true solo is the worst possible scenario for somebody to maintain their mental health. To your point, and to probably a lot of things that you've got some self-denial about, because I did, right? Like in terms of your own capacity to keep going, to keep dealing with this stuff. I can say from experience, this stuff piles when you're a true solo. Do you think, I've talked to Carolyn Elephant about this. I think being a true solo is good when like you're just taking cases. You've got a few cases. Your family doesn't really need the money. You're not like feeling compelled to take crap that you don't want to take. You can listen to that small voice in your head that says don't take this. But when like you're the business, you're the show, you're the only money coming in, that stuff starts to pile up. Do you have a true solo exit plan? Do you have like a way to try to create some of that scale and some of that margin for yourself going forward?
Yeah, so I mean, obviously, it's not my intention to remain a true solo. I do have recently hired an assistant, recently hired a contract attorney for per project basis. So I do plan to continue to grow. Looking right now for a virtual paralegal if anyone wants is interested. But yeah, I mean, I definitely don't want to stay um, doing this all by myself.
Right.
So it's my plan to expand and to grow, to become licensed in California, to have a practice here and in California. So it's definitely not my end goal.
Mm.
Right now, and as I get busier, it's becoming more immediate to get on these things.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because it's just like this morning I was like, oh my god, I have all these things to do. And yeah, so I mean, it's definitely the what's happening right now, but it's not. Hopefully by this time next month I have a
Yeah, we'll have a different conversation.
yes, I have a paralegal hired and another contract attorney in Velez law. So
Yeah, I remember years ago reading something in one of these, how to run a business books that I was consuming after law school, because freaking who tells you anything during law school? And it said basically hire when your staff member that you're trying to enhance is at 80% capacity, right? Don't wait till they're at 120, 140% capacity, because then they won't be able to train the person that you're bringing in. The transfer will be so clumsy of tasks. And so for you, true solo, and anybody else, I mean, this is true of hiring in general, but especially if you feel like you are practicing at 120% of your, like you're just strung, weight, your butter spread over too much bread, to use a line from, what was that? That was from Lord of the Rings. If you feel like that, then it's already too late. Like you're going to have a hard time training the person that you would bring in. So, my advice to anybody would be, if you feel like you're, 80% ish, go find somebody. Go find somebody that you can give yourself time to train and replace. Just curious, where are you mostly getting these people from, like personal networks, like you're sending out to Facebook or whatever? Hey, I need appearance counsel or whatever.
yeah, so like Facebook, or there's freelance companies out there that I've kind of touched
Right.
base with. Pineapple Staffing is a good one. That's where I have my assistant from. So I mean, there's so many resources out there.
Yeah.
I think a lot of my spare time is spent researching for my business.
Mm.
As exhausting as that sounds, a lot of it's out there. You can find a service for anything, especially when you're virtual and you're trying to stay that
Gosh,
way.
yeah. Yeah.
COVID, there's been so many advancements to all these resources that you could reach out to. It's just having the I guess dedication to really spend all that time, because as a solo, it's not like 8 to 5. Yeah, you get to set your own hours, and sure I can hop out for lunch or go to the gym or take an afternoon off. But at the end of the day, all that work is still piling.
Yeah, well, and a shout out to our friends at lawclerk.legal, an unpaid shout out. We are taking sponsorships, Kristen, Greg, Talitha, anytime you want to call me, throw money at me. But like I use them, and I've encouraged people to use them for the legal tasks that you hate, which for me was every legal task, right? Like anything that remotely involved looking at a piece of paper or a screen for an extended period of time. I was like, I suck at this, and I really need to get somebody else to do this. I was only good at, the consults, and in court, I was terrible at everything else. Because I just I didn't love it. And it was cheaper for me to go get somebody else to do that stuff, and for me to do more sales and more court time. That actually made us more money. So shout out to them. The costs are reasonable. The experts are legit. So what's next? Like, it sounds like right now you probably have, I don't want to guess as to your revenue, but it sounds like you've got enough revenue that you're like, okay, I'm not going to die,
Mhm.
but creating enough, promise of margin that you can keep going. What's your next growth experiment? The next thing that you want to try to sort of tweak the firm forward a little bit?
Um, I think that the only really thing on my radar right now is just hiring more help, and I do have the revenue there to really hire a few hands to
Yeah.
help me out. It's definitely not my intention to become permanent or to become, brick and mortar or hire in person bodies for help. I definitely want to continue the virtual, complete as your day allows kind of uh, COVID COVID
Yeah.
environment that we've all come accustomed to. I think that a lot of things can be done much more flexibly,
Okay,
flexibly.
another unpaid shout out to our friend Alicia Pierre. Um, she's in the group, I think. Actually, I think she told me she got rid of Facebook, which might have been like the wisest thing I've ever heard. Yeah, so she got rid of that. I'll connect you to what I was going to say is if you're early in this process of like trying to hire people, it's really those people need systems. Unless you're going to hire you, right? Every sort of handoff to somebody else, there's this huge drop off because either you have to hire such a high level person that they don't need processes, which is just freaking expensive, or you don't have the processes for the people who like need to come in and be able to make decisions, and so you just end up making every decision, right? One way or the other, it's a lot of you. So Alicia is really good, especially on Google Apps, at creating systems built around Google, of being able to say, okay, this is how you're going to automate your intakes. This is how your communications are going to ping around. These are ways to collaborate. So I would connect with her. I know that Joey Vitale, who's in the group, has talked about how he's hired somebody specific for systems, like not hired an employee and said, write down what you do, but hired somebody who does systems to come in and create those systems, follow them around a little bit. He's got a lot of input in that as well. So make sure
Right,
I
and I think
send
that's
you
what
the
I've been working on for the past few months is definitely automation.
yeah.
I have workflows. I have, my templates, my systems, processes, lots of Loom videos. Those are great
Hmm.
for showing, every time I do something new, I try and make a Loom video. So just store it in there for
Yeah,
someone,
that's a
when
great
I do
habit. Yeah.
I don't have to go back and say, okay, let's unpack this. Let's onboard you. Just here's a link where you can find everything. Here's all my passwords. Here's everything that you need. Every question you have is in this document.
Hmm. That's awesome.
So that's kind of what I've been
Okay, but
spending.
you're a freak of nature, because I didn't do any of that stuff, and I don't know anybody. It is. Yeah, when you get in the churn, you get in that daily churn of people calling you all the time, and we all you like know that we should do what you're talking about where you're creating systems, but it can be really exhausting to prioritize that. So it's good that you built that habit. I think that's fantastic. And I would encourage anybody autobiographical, if you're bad at that, don't feel afraid. That's not a loss, right? Like, you don't have to say to yourself, I can only hire somebody who creates new revenue. I can only hire a paralegal if I can bill that person out hourly. You hiring somebody to create systems or to improve your, security or what, there are all kinds of things. I hired a personal chef just to take some of that stuff off of my plate so I can focus on other things. Like, hiring doesn't have to look like I hired a paralegal. It can be all kinds of people.
Yeah. And that's one thing that I had a hard time with is at first when I started hiring is delegation. Because when you're the first point of contact for every single thing, you don't think of I like no one else can do that. I have to do these things.
Right.
So it was a struggle for me when I first hired to really understand what could be delegated, what makes more sense. But as I got in the flow of things, it became so much more easier,
Right.
and I thought, oh my God, why didn't I do this earlier? But it's all a learning curve. And I think, they don't teach you how to run your business in law school. So when you make that decision, it's kind of like, well, how well off do you want to be? How committed and dedicated do you want to be? Because we can all go out there and take a case or two, attorneys, and get it done. But I mean, how perfection, like it's just I guess, perspective. And I want to be the best. So I spend a lot of my time perfecting all of these things and
Right.
going into each matter. And there's so many moving parts that it becomes exhausting. But if you have the time or the will, it makes sense to just attack it. You just go in there and get it done, and you'll feel better the next month.
Well, do what you have to do to free up more time for TikTok videos
I know.
because the world needs you lip syncing. It's important
I
that you
know.
spend more time lip syncing. Well, thanks for hanging out with us, Taniesa. If people want to reach out to you, learn more about your practice, maybe send you gobs and gobs of family law cases they don't want to deal with, what's the best way to connect with you?
They can reach out to my office line. It's 502-586-6030. My Instagram handle at Velez Law PLLC. My website, tvelezlaw.com. There's TikTok. Hit me up on TikTok. I've had several clients now. They find me on TikTok and say, "Hey, I have a matter for you," and I'm like, "Let's talk about it." I have a booking link on my personal Instagram, which is T_the attorney. So lots of ways to reach me.
Cool. All right. Thank you. We appreciate you. For everyone watching, listening out in the world. If you want to be on this show, to hang out with us on Lawyer Forward Live on Fridays, just reach out to, I guess you can send an email to me, mike@lawyerforward.com, and we'll help you with that. Or Alicia is probably better, Alicia at lawyerforward.com. And we will see you guys next time. Thank you, Taniesa.
Thank you for having me. It was great.
Have a good one.
You too.